Welcome to Mediocre Arts and Crafts. I'm Bug. Happy World Card Making Day. I thought today was a great reason to launch my YouTube channel. I'm a paper crafter that got started about 30 years ago, paper piecing winter scenes out of construction paper. Sometimes it's hard to know where to start when you start a new hobby, but what's important to remember is for card making, all you really need is a piece of paper, an envelope, and a pen. You slice it up, fold it in half, write a simple sentiment on the front, maybe a little drawing, add a note inside, and it's ready to get into the mail. Craft stores do have a wide range of stamps, different prices, different types and styles. When you pick out a stamp that you like, you can bring it home and ink it up with even a standard Crayola marker, and it'll make a perfect image in the corner of your card, and it's ready to go. So once you have a stamp or two in your supply cabinet, you might want to pick up a ink pad. The important thing to remember about buying ink pads is if you have the money, spend a few extra dollars on getting something that's higher quality. A higher quality ink pad may be a little more expensive, but the ink saturation is going to be better, the colors will be more vibrant, and the pad will stay firm and flat and be able to handle, more impressions over time. For this card, I didn't get a great impression because of the way I kind of just mushed the stamp to the paper. So I went ahead and just got a gel pen out and I did some highlight lines and a couple of hearts, and this guy is good to go. So I actually put a personalized little note inside this card. I don't usually stamp a sentiment inside of a card just because I like a lot of room to write a personal message or draw a squiggle, and if I don't have a lot to say, I might just write really large. So that first stamp I used was on a wood block. And a lot of stamps now are either acrylic, photopolymer, or cling stamps that have a foam backing. These types of stamps do require an acrylic block, and that'll cost a few dollars. And you may need a few different sizes in your supply cabinet. But photopolymer cling stamps, they take a lot less space for storage. I used to have tons of shoebox containers full of woodblock stamps, and now the same amount of stamps can fit, in a large envelope. So I just wanted to point out that this would be ready to go even if you didn't color it in. But once you have a stamp with an image that you do want to color in, you just use whatever supplies you have in your home. Pencils, pens, markers. The ones I'm using here are alcohol markers. These first two red ones are a store brand. They're a little less expensive than a higher quality marker. And all markers, alcohol markers, will blend together. The reason that a higher quality or more expensive alcohol marker is desirable is because the ink saturation is better and they blend pretty flawlessly even with limited practice. And most importantly, the nibs don't fray even though they're flexible. For the Copic sketch markers I'm using here, you can also buy re-inkers. There are plenty of alcohol marker brands that do also sell re-inkers. So you can re-ink the pen 2 or 3 times with a re-inker that costs about the same as buying a new pen. So once you have a couple stamps in your supply cabinet, you can watch a bunch of YouTube videos and learn some fancy techniques. This image is the same individual candied apple stamp that I used before. I just used what's known as the masking technique to be able to stamp on top, and it is colored in and ready to go. You can certainly continue to use a ruler and scissors to trim your paper, but a paper trimmer really speeds up paper crafting, and they're almost essential for large projects like holiday mass production or turning 25 sheets of cardstock into 50 card bases. A scoreboard will give you crisp, professional lines, score lines that lead to an end result that is a little more finished. When I'm doing one or two pieces of cardstock, I might fold them right away in the scoreboard, using the little end marks there to line it up. Of course, once you watch a few more paper crafting videos, you'll know that there's two camps, people who score and then fold forward and people who score and fold back. For me, it depends on the type of paper I'm using and what kind of mood I'm in. If you're following along and you have the essentials in your supply cabinet, you might want to pick up some designer paper. And don't be fooled by designer paper. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Most craft stores have individual sheets, anywhere from plain paper, textured cardstock, to designer paper packs. This is a 6x6 woodland forest pack from Pebbles. Buying a coordinating sheet stack really makes it easy to layer and have everything match. For this particular card, I take a number of different pieces of the paper, the coordinating paper, and I cut some strips, and they all match because they're from the same selection. Here I'm just trying to decide the orientation of my card. And now I kind of lay these out to decide what order they're going to go in, how big they might be, and then I'll just start chopping away at them. Of course, you see here I was super thoughtful about this, and I cut these strips of paper just off screen. But basically I'm just using the paper trimmer's little guide there to cut some strips out that are about the same size, but not exactly. There's really no scientific method to this. I just kind of arrange them a couple different ways and see what I like. And I've also got a piece of scrap here that I'm going to slice up to put a little sentiment on. I did have a moment where I couldn't decide whether I wanted to put a Happy Harvest stamp, which would allow me, you know, a good 4 weeks or 8 weeks to get it sent out during the fall. But instead I decided to use a Happy Halloween stamp. So I got 2 or 3 weeks before I need to get this into the mail. So I grabbed my stamp pad and ink up my stamp. I did have a little bit of trouble with this little strip of white cardstock. It was bowed a little bit. It was kind of floating around off the table at the end, so I flipped it over, turned it around, and then I got just a really great image there. And then I started chopping that up so I could make some tails on that as well. It took me a long time to realize that cutting ribbon tails in paper isn't difficult. It just takes practice, and the most important thing to remember is to slice up the middle of the paper and then cut from each end in, and that way you can kind of see it building as you go. For the sentiment, I realized that I was going to have it oriented the other way. So kind of sat it down there, decided how long I wanted it to be, sliced it up, and then realized that I was going to have to just flip around my other tails, my other strips there, so that they're all in the same direction. Of course, this guy didn't turn out great because I went a little too fast. Of course, this is sped up a little bit, but I was going fast anyway. And so I had to chop that up a little bit more to get it right. And I decided to orient these on the right side of the paper. These strips with the ribbon tails are going to be oriented to the right side, like I said, and they are going to overlap. We have this little white 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch border on all of the sides of this plaid paper. And then I decided that instead of lining up these strips against that plaid paper, I would overlap them over the white onto all the way to the flush with the right side of the cardstock. That was a lot to say. I use a lot of different types of adhesive for paper projects depending on what I'm working on. Here I'm using art glitter glue. You just need a small amount. It dries super quickly, so by the time I set each strip on top of the previous one has already dried. If you're using a wet glue that takes time to dry, then you would have to wait, because otherwise doing these on top of each other this quickly might cause you to move around the two on the bottom if they're not already dry. So sometimes it's hard for me to decide when to stop, but I think this card is done. It's got some white space, it's got some layers, and I'm super happy with it. So my goal today with my first video was to ensure new card makers that you don't have to know a bunch of fancy techniques or need a bunch of high-dollar supplies in order to make amazing heartfelt cards that any recipient will be delighted to receive. I challenge you to find a piece of paper and a pen, cut that paper, fold it in half, put a peace sign on the top of it, write a little note inside, and send it off. Let someone know that you're thinking of them. If you're new to card making or paper crafting, please comment below and let me know what you think of this video, and let me know what types of videos you'd like to see in the future. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. You can also find me on Instagram, Mediocre Arts and Crafts, where I do 2 tiny giveaways every month.